board member of the International Association of Synesthetes, Artists, and Scientists, IASAS. Digging deeper, parsing out. Many people relate to the experience of sensing others, emotions, and the environment around them. In fact, many of us simply take this to be a natural part of who we are. Now studies on mirror neurons, empathy, and neurodivergence support the experience and give it a much-needed lens inside of academia. This sensitivity is also shown in animal species such as monkeys, birds, rodents, and fish. Studies describe select members of a species displaying increased responsivity, flexibility, and plasticity, indicating an evolutionary advantage. In more recent years, this field has come to be known as sensory biology, with dedicated researchers at Johns Hopkins, Duke, the University of California campuses, and elsewhere, and has maintained a focus on animals.
Yeah.
But what does this all mean in human terms?
It's not made for
That's
kids,
where
but
mirror
it's not a
neurons
bad
come in.
game.
In his book, Mirroring People, The New Science of How We Connect with Others, Marco Iacoboni writes, "The human brain contains about 100 billion neurons, each of which can make contact with thousands, even tens of thousands of other neurons.
Yeah, the
These
border.
contacts, or synapses,
border.
are the means by which neurons communicate with one another, and their number is, at times, in psychology and medicine. It's likely that inclusion holds the key to helping to bring wholeness to a fractured culture, a softening of our defenses against sensitivity, and a thriving life to neurodivergent women and men everywhere." Part 2. Outer Frames.
What do you mean?
Chapter 3.
Press escape.
Autism, synesthesia,
bite? He's
and
asking?
ADHD.
Tell him no. Tell him no thank you.
Cece Hart grew up in California's Central Valley with a mother who noticed her strong body
Yep.
awareness as a
Alright,
child.
so go
Hart's
down
mother, a
to-
nurse, encouraged her
down
daughter
one
to go into
thirty
physical
or-
therapy
Alright,
in
so
order
go
to
up.
use her hands, and eventually Hart
Down.
became a massage therapist.
Up.
A client once mentioned synesthesia to her, and a kind of relief and shock
Press
hit her
escape
all at
again.
once. She finally had a word to describe her
so
experience of feeling what others
down
feel,
to the same one.
seeing colors when reading books, and more.
Yeah.
She didn't
That's what
learn
you
she
need.
had
Make sure you press
synesthesia
this
until
right
she was in her
button.
early 40s.
Or is it B?
Hart was a gifted child
Go
who
press
began reading
A.
at age 2.5, and she had always seen letters as colors and
Wrong middle. It might
symbols.
not be A.
A mirror touch synesthete as well. She would feel others' pain, both physical and emotional.
Let me see.
I would see another child
Sometimes
scrape,
it usually
and I
means
would
back
feel a
when it's
shock of electricity go up and down my body.
You gotta.
It never occurred to me to say anything because this was just my experience of
can call
normal. I didn't know that other people didn't experience that.
You gotta get up if you have to. It's
Hart's
just hard to
sensory
get up. My
sensitivities
back
are varied, and she wonders whether she might be classified on the autism spectrum as well. She was recently diagnosed with ADHD, something she had suspected, and that was suggested to her after finally finding a psychiatrist who took the necessary time to analyze and interpret the nuances of her symptom presentation beyond stereotypical ideas. For many people, autism, ADHD, and synesthesia occur together. She describes her world as too much or too loud. Now, as an adult, Hart walks into a room and is a magnet for others, with her long red hair and flowing colorful outfits. When I met her one evening and she hugged me close, I felt that same shock of electricity she describes. Her warmth is palpable. But when Hart was an infant, her mother took her to a pediatrician because she thought something was wrong when she didn't engage with others like her sister did. These are themes
Yeah, I don't know
that
what's
many
wrong,
women
so-
shared with me over the course of my writing this book.
Try it without.
Being bright, having multiple sensitivities or diagnoses, and having parents who fear that something is very wrong. For those of us like Hart, it takes time for our nervous systems to become calibrated to the outside world and the staccato rhythms that feel like assaults. After a series of trials and errors, figuring out what type of work matches our skills and needs, or what kind of people are compatible with us, we finally come out of our shells. Autism. A person with so-called classic autism is what many doctors and laypeople describe as socially awkward, in their own world, and lacking empathy and normal or appropriate social interaction. This pathologizing language describes a person in terms of individual norms and expectations. We don't often stop to think about what is happening in society on a larger scale that would generate such a description or make that person sound so bad. Only when we step back and examine the behaviors from a non-stigmatized perspective can we realize that people described this way aren't bad. They are merely different when measured with an established, and some might say arbitrary, barometer. In fact, many people in the autistic community like to flip the script and point out how awful neurotypical culture and expectations are. Think small talk, social niceties, herd mentality, compliance, and other unpleasant or taxing behaviors that are deemed normal. While figures like the professor and author Temple Grandin have brought attention to the gifts of autism, our culture as a whole remains steeped in images and definitions that see this kind of neurological makeup as a defect. More and more, we are appreciating the fact that the range of autistic experience is vast, necessitating the use of the label spectrum, and autistic advocates are now speaking out and challenging pervasive false notions. This is most apparent on Twitter, where artistic culture thrives and artistic individuals all over the world share personal stories and insights on their own terms and in their own voices. "Nothing about us without us" is a popular slogan. Instead of being studied from the outside, autistic people are giving voice to their experiences on their own terms. Twitter is a perfect vehicle for this, where no stone is left unturned and no question is too cumbersome. Why is the rate of suicidal ideation higher among the autistic population? Why do autistic individuals prefer that the month of April be called Autism Acceptance Month rather than Autism Awareness Month? The idea that autistic people lack empathy, for example, is often countered on Twitter, with people sharing how, in fact, it's their overabundance of empathy that causes them to shut down emotionally and retreat. There's no lack of empathy, but too much of it. How's that for reframing? What I heard in research, conducting interviews, and reporting on the autistic experience is that sensitivity features prominently in autism and is both a strength and a challenge. In the case of autistic women, many of whom have been sensitive their entire lives, but not known they were on the autism spectrum, the question of utilizing and managing sensitivity is tricky because many have been told or taught that something is wrong with them. As a result, many have experienced shame, depression, and severe anxiety. Author Samantha Kraft, who is autistic and is often a go-to resource for women wondering whether they are also autistic, has compiled an unofficial list that she says is a springboard for discussion and more awareness into the female experience of autism. This can be helpful because the authors of the DSM are often changing its scope, and many doctors and therapists are at a loss regarding how to diagnose. Here are some abbreviated items from her list regarding autism, Asperger's. Seeing things at multiple levels, including her own thinking processes. Escaping in thought or action to survive overwhelming emotions and senses. Continually analyzing existence. The DSM are often changing its scope, and many doctors and therapists are at a loss regarding how to diagnose. Here are some abbreviated items from her list regarding autism, Asperger's. Seeing things at multiple levels, including her own thinking processes. Escaping in thought or action to survive overwhelming emotions and senses.